It's time for the Josh Kirby on Sports Podcast.
That's right, folks. Another edition of the Josh Kirby on Sports Podcast. We'll have a brief look inside some college football action, plus everything you need to know from this past week one of the NFL season. That's right, folks. NFL is back. We'll also have an update on the confusing and controversial Antonio Brown situation. All that and so much more coming your way next on the Josh Kirby on Sports Podcast.
I'm glad you connected. This is Dave Johnson, voice of the Washington Wizards. You have connected to the right place because you are listening to my man, Josh Kirby on Sports Podcast.
All right, back with you with another episode of the Josh Kirby on Sports Podcast. And boy, am I excited. NFL is back. We have a lot to get into tonight, but before we do, as always, we're part of the Mayo Please Podcast Network. Make sure you check Quentin and his network out. www.mayoplease.com and on Twitter, the Mayo Please. You can find them on all streaming platforms. Excuse me, I cannot talk tonight for some reason, but you can find him. And we're brought to you by Rattle Lemon Chips. Make sure you find a bag today inside your local Martin's, Food Lion, and Giant stores. Thanks, as always, to JR Beats Official and Dave Johnson. Let's get right into it here. We have Dan Dembski calling on the phone from Blacksburg, Virginia. Had to get your takes in on week one of NFL. Dan, what's going on, buddy?
Hey, Josh. Same old, man. Just trying to just go to class, get my stuff done, and trying to stay involved down here. Had my 5 o'clock report here, my sports report today, so that was fun getting back into that. And other than that, man, just doing the same as always.
Yeah, so how's everything treating you down there? Any new internships in the sports world, or just sticking with WUVT for right now? What's your situation down there?
Yeah, I'm just sticking with that right now. I tried to get an internship, but it kind of fell through. I'm not going to go into details other than that, but it wasn't the business or anything's fault. It was kind of a communication issue, so we'll leave it at that. But yeah, I'm WUVT, and of course with the Collegiate Times, I wrote a piece about last week's football game against Old Dominion, which I know we'll touch on. I did the offensive report card for that game, so I broke it down and kind of gave my thoughts on what I saw, and so go check that out, Collegiate Times.
Yeah, definitely will do, Dan. So getting into this podcast before we talk about week one in the NFL, let's turn it over to Dan and your thoughts on the first 2 weeks of college football. How do you like Virginia Tech? How do you like the ACC? Anything you have to mind, just lay it out for us.
Well, I'll start with the Hokies, and I think the first, I guess the first couple weeks, obviously this past weekend was pretty successful, 31-17 win. Not the most clean football game played, and I think you would agree with that, Josh. Had some
from what I've watched.
Yeah, had some issues here and there, offensively and defensively. But all in all, I was pretty happy with the victory. I'll take it for sure. Of course, the first week didn't go as well for Virginia Tech, and really the score looked a lot closer than I thought the game actually was. We lost 35-28, but honestly, we could have lost by 2 scores. So I think the ACC is, to put it quite honestly, it's Clemson is way up here. I have my hand way up. You can't see that because we're on podcast right now, but that's okay. And everybody else in the ACC just falls way below that. I think that's just a common thing. So, everyone's chasing Clemson right now. Of course, Virginia Tech's in a different side of the conference, so luckily we don't have to play them this season. I believe we play them next year. We switch off. We play different teams in the other side of the conference. So, but yeah, the ACC is honestly, to put it quite honestly, not looking too strong right now in total. Florida State didn't look very good. Miami hasn't played their best football. Of course, Virginia Tech hasn't played very well. I'll tell you a couple teams that have caught my eye, Josh, and that's been I hate to say it because it hurts me to say it, is UVA. They've played pretty well so far this year. I think they're going to be a tough team this year for Virginia Tech to go up against. That might be the best team we've faced since this Commonwealth Cup streak has been in our favor. And UNC as well, of course, hiring Mac Brown. An interesting hire, I think, to say the least. Many people thought, it was kind of a head-scratching hire. He'd been working for ESPN for all those years. He'd been away from college football, but they bring him back, and I don't know if he's reignited the program, but he certainly has made an impact there so far. So watch out for UVA, North Carolina, and the ACC. They're on the up and up right now. So obviously we're keeping an eye, especially on both of those teams, because we played both of them, of course, UVA towards the end of the season around Thanksgiving. And I think we play North Carolina is our second ACC game of the season. I'd have to double check the schedule to make sure. But so that's kind of my outlook on the ACC. Like I said, I think at the end of the day, the other side of the ACC, it's going to be Clemson. I think they're the most talented team in the ACC. They have the most depth. And, of course, returning a Heisman winner who's only a sophomore is not half bad either. So I think Clemson, I think everyone else is just behind them and everyone's chasing them, as I said earlier. So that's my outlook on the ACC, and it should be a fun season because I think this side of the ACC is very intriguing. There's a lot of teams like Virginia Tech, like North Carolina, like UVA that could do something and get to that ACC title game. It's going to be interesting, but time will tell. College football is funny. There's a lot more upsets in college football, I feel, than in the NFL, and I think that's one reason that it's more exciting than NFL. But there were some sloppy games in the NFL this week. We'll get to that, and we'll touch on that. But yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it right now.
Yeah, going back to that UNC game, after they won, Mac Brown showed off his dance moves there in the locker room.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I tell you what, man, for an old guy, he can move, man. That's that was funny. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So, Dan, what about conferences besides the ACC? Have you watched much besides the ACC, like the SEC or the Big 12, Pac-10 conferences like that? What can you tell us about them?
Oh man, well, I think in the SEC they've had some letdowns too. Of course, Georgia State knocking off Tennessee in that first week of play. That is a bad look for the SEC when you lose to a team like Georgia State, which I didn't even know they had a football team. I had to go and look. But they knocked off Tennessee 38-30, and that was in Knoxville. So you lose that game at home. That's pretty bad. And
Yeah,
I think similarly to the ACC, the SEC has a similar thing where it's Alabama's just miles ahead of any other team. I think the SEC has more depth than the ACC does, but even still, they haven't played. Excuse me, they haven't played. You don't see too many great teams in the SEC. I think Georgia obviously is probably the team that everybody would say, but with Alabama has a shot at that college football playoff, and I think you got to put LSU in there too. Obviously with a huge win in week 1, and then in week 2, of course, that big upset or that big win in prime time. So the SEC is interesting. You got some pretty solid teams. We'll see what happens. I mean, I still think Alabama wins at the end of the day, but obviously Georgia's a really good football team. They're 2-0 right now, as they should be, and of course LSU. I didn't give the score. LSU Texas, of course, 45-38, a high-scoring game. That was a good game. And also Florida as well. I think I may have, at the start of this segment, I may have kind of crapped on the SEC before I actually looked at how impressive some of these numbers are. So I apologize to any SEC fans out there. So, but yeah, I think Alabama's obviously the team to beat. Teams have been trying to chase them for years, and I think Georgia has the best chance. And I really want to see Jake Fromm, the Georgia quarterback. He's a senior who's probably is he a senior? Yeah, he's a senior. He's going to have a big season, and watch out for him in the NFL draft. I wouldn't be surprised if he's a very, very high draft pick coming out of Georgia there. He's actually a junior. I apologize. I couldn't remember. So, yeah, I think Georgia and Bama are pretty solid, but watch out for that for LSU too. They're a pretty solid team, and Auburn too. They got that big win in Week 1 against Oregon. That was a really, really tough football game. That was a fun one to watch. I saw that one as well. Of course, Auburn 27-21 over Oregon, which I thought Oregon was overrated, but. Yeah, that's my outlook on the SEC. They're by far the best conference again this season. So we'll see if that remains to be true. But I don't see that changing anytime soon. Just the amount of top 15, top 20 teams they get every year. It's just insane. And we're watching I caught the end of Colorado and Nebraska this past Saturday afternoon, early evening. Of course, Colorado got the win in overtime against number 25 Nebraska. Pretty big upset there in Boulder, Colorado. So, I think the Pac-12 is probably the weakest of the Power 5 conferences, and I think that's been true the last few seasons. We'll see if things change this year, but Stanford, of course, had a big loss. This past weekend, 45-20, they lost to USC. USC, of course, unranked. I could see them make a rise and maybe have a shot at the Pac-12 title. I think Oregon is a team that you could probably put near the top of that list. Washington's a pretty good football team, although they also got upset by California. So the Pac-12 is interesting because they've been so weak compared to the other Power 5 conferences in recent years. And also another team to watch in the Pac-12 is Utah, who Lee Corso picked to go to the college football playoff and get to the national championship game. So write that down so we can make sure we write down that cold take for Lee Corso. But yeah, they're 2-0 right now. So this is interesting to me. But I was really surprised by that Nebraska-Colorado game this weekend. I guess Nebraska, in hindsight, last season, not a good football team. They were 4-8. They're supposed to be back this year. It's kind of like how they say Texas is back every season, similar thing, and they never are. So Colorado with a big upset win there at home. I watched the end of that game. They scored 24 points in the fourth quarter and outscored them by 10 there in the fourth to send it to overtime. And then, of course, they get the field goal and the stop to halt Nebraska. So, keep an eye on the Pac-12. I don't know how much. I don't really know. I don't have a clear favorite right now, Josh. It's just too early, and there really aren't any powerful teams coming out of the Pac-12 because it looks like most of these games are really going to be a toss-up from here on out. I'd also like to talk quickly about the Big Ten, specifically how Maryland has played in their first 2 weeks. Of course, with former Virginia Tech quarterback Josh Jackson, he's played exceptionally well. Of course, this past weekend, they absolutely dismantled Syracuse, who was 21st, 63-20. Josh Jackson, 21 of 38, 296 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also had a pick. But Maryland hanging 63 on Syracuse. That's also not a good look for the ACC, of course. But yeah, Maryland in their first 2 weeks, they dropped 79 in week 1. They take down Howard 79-0. That just doesn't happen. I don't care who you're playing in college football. A score like the score that's that lopsided doesn't happen. Of course, also in the Big Ten in Week 1, Penn State dropped 79 on Idaho. So the Big Ten, they're a conference to me that is just really powerful offensively. They've got some really good offensive teams. Of course, with Ohio State included as well, and Michigan State. But I'd like to talk about almost the biggest near upset that I would have seen in a long time, Josh. And it was close. I don't know if you caught this game, the Army Michigan game. Did you see any of that?
I did not actually. I I do work on Saturdays, so it's
Some of us have to, yeah.
mainly following on ESPN and Twitter on my phone.
Yeah, well, low scoring game. It was 14. It was 14-14. Actually, Army was up 14-7 going into the third quarter. Michigan scored late in the third quarter to make it 14-14. And of course, they went to OT. I believe Army scored in their first. Both teams scored in their first overtime, and then of course Michigan kicks the field goal late to steal the victory. But that's a game that, I mean, I'm not very comfortable if I'm a Michigan fan, because their schedule, obviously, it doesn't get easier. After this, of course, they're on the road at Wisconsin. Then they host Rutgers and Iowa. On the road at Illinois and Penn State. Then they host Notre Dame. They're at Maryland. They host Michigan State, and then they're on the road against Indiana, and they finish with Ohio State, of course. I mean, I'm not feeling too confident if I'm a Michigan fan right about now, and especially this is the season where so many experts have predicted, Jim Harbaugh's on the hot seat. And of course, he's been on the hot seat for about 3 or 4 years there now. But this is probably one of the most talented teams they're going to have a shot at the college football playoff. They can't afford to slip up, and especially this early in the season. Josh, Army only threw 4 passes. They of course run the triple option, and it's amazing.
4 passes?
They pass 4 times in this modern era.
Wow. That reminds me of that Georgia Tech game where I can't recall who they were facing, but they only had like 2 passes. They ran like the triple option the entire game.
Yeah, it's the same offense, because the head coach used to be the head coach of Georgia Tech, who now is retired, I believe. Used to coach at Army, so he got that offense from them and ran the same triple option there. So it's just amazing in college football nowadays with the pro style, run and gun type of offenses that we see, that a team can run the ball and just not be stopped. I mean, quite honestly, they had 200 rushing yards as a team. They only had 238 yards. Michigan had 310. So Michigan should have rolled in this game, and only having to defend the pass 4 times, and you still can't stop them. That's concerning. That's very alarming, especially with their Big Ten schedule. It's going to get tough here down the stretch. That's not an easy conference, and you can't sleep on any of those games. So I think in that conference, Ohio State's probably my pick, as many people would say, to have a shot at the college football playoff. Again, that's one of those things I don't like to say. I'm not a big Ohio State fan. Not a huge fan of theirs. But they have Indiana this week. They open up conference play. That's going to be a good game. I don't really see any other. Iowa and Iowa State are on at 4 o'clock on Saturday. That should be a good game, Josh, because we all know Iowa State always gets a few upsets a season. They could be terrible, but they'll always upset 1 or 2 teams. So, yeah, that's my outlook. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Did you talk about next week Pittsburgh's playing Penn State?
Yeah, that's right. Pittsburgh on the road at Penn State. I'll tell you what, man, Pittsburgh is, they're not nearly the talented team they were just a couple years ago. But, I mean, that could be a trap game for Penn State. It's a home game. It's a 12 o'clock game. You never know. I mean, that's kind of one of those games. They're 17-point favorite, Penn State is. as they should be. But I mean, that's the kind of game you sort of just say, oh well, we're favored, so we're not going to be slowed down, and you end up losing. So um, that's where I could see an upset actually. Yeah, I think again, Pittsburgh, not the talented team they were before, but certainly
Yeah,
not a scrub team to say the least.
yeah, another team I want to look into real quick. This Saturday at 7:30, Florida State against 2-0 UVA. This is gonna
Yeah,
be this is gonna be a test for Florida State because last year they struggled. This year they started off the season 1-1. So this is gonna be a tough test to see if Florida State has improved from last season or not, in my opinion.
that's a great point, Josh. I didn't even see that game. That's one I'm going to be circling as well. Of course, that's on the ACC network. But yeah, UVA, like I said at the beginning of the show, very very good football team this year. They seem to really have it working right now on offense, and their defense has played pretty well too. Now, of course, Florida State opened up the season with that terrible loss against Boise State, and then Josh, this past weekend they barely beat um, Louisiana Monroe, 45-44. They had to go to overtime. That's not good. I mean, you schedule a team like Louisiana Monroe because it's a sure win, and it's also not good for the ACC when you have a loss, when you almost have a loss like that. So that's a great game. When's the last time UVA's beaten Florida State? I don't know. I'm gonna have to look that up. I'll see if I can find that.
Dan, let me ask you one more thing before we wrap this segment up. What's your
Absolutely.
opinion on Jalen Hurts playing for Oklahoma this season and how he has done so far?
No, he's played pretty well. I think I don't think he hasn't played as well as Kyler, but of course I don't think people were expecting him. They're very different players, but he's got Oklahoma right where they need to be right now. They're cooking on all cylinders. They dropped 49 in week 1 against Houston, 70 in week 2 this past weekend against South Dakota. So, Jalen Hurts, he's played extremely well. He's 34 of 41 so far with 6 touchdowns and no picks. Now I know they haven't played, high caliber offenses, but he also leads the team in rushing. So this could be a home run for Oklahoma, and they're another team that I think, Josh, with Jalen Hurts at the helm, could make a run for the national title. I want to see how Oklahoma plays when they start conference play. They got UCLA this Saturday in the Rose Bowl. That's going to be a great game. UCLA, of course, 0-2, hasn't played well to start the season. But they start with Texas Tech the following weekend, or they have a bye week the 21st. They're back the 28th. So I'm interested really to see, how Jalen Hurts plays in those conference games, because we all know when you have a guy who's as talented as Jalen Hurts, he should drop 3 or 4 touchdowns plus against, the 2 teams they played so far. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I've been extremely impressed with how he's played. It just goes to show you, how great he was at Alabama, and didn't get an opportunity after Tua Tagovailoa took over. And it's just crazy to me that it's weird to see him in an Oklahoma uniform too. But starting to get used to that now after 2 weeks of football. But I certainly think he's going to be a fantastic player, and he can help propel them to the college football playoff. I think he's a great quarterback.
Well, we do appreciate the knowledge on college football for weeks 1 and 2, Dan. Greatly appreciate your insight on that. So, when is your next college football game you will be covering for Virginia Tech?
Well, of course, you have a game this weekend hosting Furman. That's another noon kickoff. I haven't volunteered to write anything yet. I think we have our newspaper meeting tomorrow evening, so I'll be I'll be there, and I'll probably volunteer to write something about the game. Um, I'd like to go. I'd like to sit in the press box for a game and cover it at some point this season. I'm sure there'll be an opportunity to do that, but I'm not planning on doing that right now. But I hope to write another report card or maybe a small story or something about the game, and hopefully, we blow them out. It's an FCS team. We should. So we'll see what happens. But I'm excited. I'm not too optimistic for Virginia Tech this season. I'll be honest with you, Josh, and I think you and I have had this conversation before. So, we'll see how it goes. I'm not too optimistic, especially after last season where we had some letdowns and the whole season did not go our way. So, I think in week 5 is when we open up with conference play. Actually, we start with Duke, and then in week 6 we play North Carolina. So those are going to be 2 very tough games. Sorry, we played Miami in week 6 or week 6. I apologize. I'm rambling on here, but I think Virginia Tech's. Honestly, we should win 8 games, maybe 9 games. With as much talent as we have and as good as we're supposed to be. That's the key word there. So we'll see what happens at the end of the day. We have to come to play, and we can't look past these smaller schools, these smaller teams. Especially a team like Furman. It makes me nervous as heck because we all know we're almost a 22-point favorite, but that doesn't mean much in the grand scheme of things. So keep an eye on it. Hopefully we blow them out. Big confidence booster at home. Crossing my fingers on that one.
All right. Well, thank you for that once again, Dan. We're going to segue into pro football. Week 1 kicked off on Thursday. But before week 1 even started, no, let me correct that. Before week 1 games on Sunday started, there was a ton of news breaking on Antonio Brown. And I sort of compiled a rough timeline from what I have seen on the news about what Antonio Brown has done leading up to his release and then sign with the New England Patriots. So, Dan, do you have any thoughts on this Antonio Brown situation for our viewers?
I think I've worn myself out talking about this topic. I think we started talking about it 2 or 3 weeks ago, Josh, when I was home. This whole saga began with the helmet and all that stuff that's followed it, and it's just tiring. And I think this whole situation was kind of what Antonio Brown was planning on doing all along. I've heard a lot of people hint at that. Of course, I changed my views on that a few times. I said maybe he has some sort of mental health problem or something because the way he was acting was not indicative of the person he used to be. You know what I mean? So, I'm glad that it seems like he's getting what he wants. He had a couple of Instagram posts where he had a pile of cash or something, and the Patriots with the rings. I don't know. I'm tired of this story, to be honest. The Patriots, they were so dominant on Sunday. I don't even know if they need Antonio Brown, but he's certainly going to help things. If this ends up working out and he does what he has to do, then so be it. But I'm ready for the story to end because it's just had so many parts, so many layers added to it. It's just ridiculous, and I think you're ready and I'm ready to just kiss it goodbye and just move on with the season and hope that he finally gets his act together for real now and he starts playing football.
Yeah, I'm definitely tired of hearing about this story also. So let's run down the timeline really quick.
Okay.
He started off by saying he would retire if he could not wear his old helmet. He held out from training camp, then filed 2 grievances against the NFL for his helmet. Then he apparently finds a helmet he likes and starts participating again. So that right there wasn't even the most bizarre part of the whole timeline. It gets even more crazy when I saw the report about the Raiders GM Mike Mayock issuing a letter to Antonio Brown fining him for the training camp time he has missed. He
Which
ended up
should have happened.
he ended up posting that on Instagram.
Mhm.
Then the Raiders suspended him. So that was very confusing. And then after that, it goes from the Raiders suspend him to Antonio Brown apologizes in front of the captains. Then John Gruden says he is playing. Next thing you know, Antonio Brown
Well,
finds out he does not get any guaranteed money, and he asks for his release.
well, there was two things in there that happened that you missed, and the
That's
one
from
was
that's from what I've seen. I'm sorry to cut you off, but if I
no,
did
no,
not
no.
have everything, I do apologize. But that's from what I've heard over the past couple of weeks for me. So if I miss one or two things, I do apologize. This was just a rough timeline.
Yeah, but no, it's fine. I was just going to mention, the heated argument between Antonio Brown and Mike Mayock that led to the apology, which led to the video. Did you see the video that he posted?
Yeah,
It was
video with John Gruden's phone call
John
with
Gruden's phone
him.
call, right? Right, and that, I believe that was after the apology, so that just added a whole new layer to it, and I think by that point, a lot of people had just thought, yeah, well, they're going to release him at this point. They don't want to put up with all that stuff, and that's exactly what happened. So, I'm glad that we can put this story to bed. I hope, I think it's obvious to me he never wanted to play for the Raiders. I don't know how you feel, Josh, but it seems to me that if he wanted to be an Oakland Raider, he wouldn't have been acting that way. He wouldn't have been doing everything in his power that he could to, no longer be a part of the team or, have his way or whatnot. So, it's craziness. It's just pure craziness at the end of the day.
Yeah, when you brought it up to me saying that Antonio Brown did this to get released because the Raiders weren't that good, I sort of thought about it, and I think I'm gonna agree with you now on that. And I think there was some sort of inside information from
Mm-hmm.
somebody in the Patriots telling Antonio Brown, "Hey, do whatever you can to get released, and then we'll pick you up." Because
Which is illegal.
earlier, like in March or somewhere, the Patriots tried picking Antonio Brown up from the Steelers, but the
Yeah.
Steelers declined that. So now the Patriots get Antonio Brown for a lot less.
Yeah, and that's not legal, I don't think. I think that's collusion. If the Patriots were telling him, do what you can to get released, and then we'll bring you on and make it seem like, it was just a natural thing. But he signed quickly. I don't know the exact amount of
It was
hours.
like 3 hours after.
It was
If
quick.
I'm correct.
It was quick. Yeah, it wasn't even a full 12 hours. So, yeah, it's just bizarre is the way I would describe the whole thing. But if the Patriots had something, if they had a hand in this, then I think the NFL needs to investigate it. And God knows that the Patriots with another investigation, people are going to be upset, including especially Patriots fans. But you can't. There's certain things in this league you just can't do, and that's one of them. If in fact that's the case,
Well,
I don't know for sure.
I was just speculating. I'm not
That's
trying to say
exactly what I'm
somebody
saying.
actually did that, but along the lines of
It's fishy.
Antonio Brown didn't want to play for the
It's
Raiders,
fishy though.
you know.
Yeah,
But
yeah. It's just odd. It's not normal. So, I don't know if an investigation is needed, but who knows? Who knows? We'll see what happens. It's one of those things you have to see how it unfolds. But of course, Goodell is pretty good friends with Robert Kraft, so they could be in cahoots together. You just don't know. You just don't know. It's just a thought. I don't want to make any Patriots fans upset. I know one in particular that would not be thrilled with what I'm saying. So, Jason Uri, I apologize. Anyway,
Yeah,
it's just
so,
speculation, like you said.
so moving on here, after Antonio Brown gets released, he posts a YouTube video of him scrolling on Twitter, then running out to his backyard screaming, "I'm free!" or
Yeah,
something. Then he proceeds to call his grandma saying he is free. Then 3 hours later, he gets signed by the Patriots. So,
big.
um, now, I'll tell you in conclusion, with the Patriots signing him, I think it was a terrible decision, in my opinion, for the Patriots to sign him because the locker room chemistry, number one. How's Tom Brady and Bill Belichick going to handle Antonio Brown, like if he were to act up or something, you know? And like
Yeah, here's the
it's
thing.
it's an awkward situation in the
Yeah,
locker room, in my opinion. And I think if he acts up once, if he says anything, he's gone. The New England Patriots are the
they don't
team
put up
that
with
will
that.
not put up with anything in the league.
I totally agree. I totally agree. Belichick is a disciplinarian. You know, he's kind of an old-fashioned sort of coach. So, yeah, I totally agree with that. I wouldn't be surprised if he cleans up his act. But yeah, I totally agree. I think if he has one mess up, Bill Belichick's going to say, well, we can find someone who's a cricket player to play receiver because it seems to be the kind of players they bring in, the guys you never heard of before, and put him in your spot, and we'll be fine. Just put us in the Super Bowl. So
The
that's
Patriots are a team every year that
the way they
can
operate.
find a
The way they
way.
operate. Yep, totally agree. Totally agree. They're they're an unbelievable team, probably one of the greatest teams I've ever seen. I think the greatest team in my lifetime for sure. Um, Obviously, with a dynasty that's lasted 20 years, I mean, I don't think many people can argue with that. But yeah, that's there's a culture there in New England, and it's you come here, you do your job, you do what you're supposed to do, you take care of business, and you don't all this extracurricular stuff is out the door. You don't bring that baggage here in New England, and I think that's going to be interesting to see what'll happen there if Antonio Brown obeys the Patriots' commands or not. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, but it will just be something. I in the back of my mind, I know that something's saying that Antonio Brown will not say a word, and the Patriots will end up winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah, similar thing happened with Randy Moss. Of course, people brought that. I've heard people bring that up.
No.
Um,
You can't compare Antonio Brown to Randy Moss.
it's
You
similar.
can't.
It's
They're
similar. It's not the same situation. I understand.
I mean they're not the same people at all. Randy Moss has a way better attitude than him, and it was for completely different reasons. I know
I don't
some
know. He had a
people are
pretty
saying similar, but I just don't agree with Randy Moss getting compared with Antonio Brown.
well. Here's the big difference, and it's something that maybe people on your side of things may not have considered. It's the fact that social media didn't exist. Well, it wasn't as prominent back then as it is now, and everything's a production, everything's a theatrical thing, and I think Antonio Brown feeds off that, and he knows people are going to look at this, people are going to pay attention to this, and that's what it's all about. So I'm sure if Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. I mean, Twitter, I think Twitter wasn't around yet. Facebook was around, but it wasn't nearly like it is now, where you have so many users on there. That's the big difference to me. Randy Moss, he had a pretty bad attitude towards the end there in Oakland, and I think people tend to forget about that. But a similar situation, being that he wanted to play for a team that was a championship contender, like in his younger years when he was a Minnesota Viking, especially his first few years in the league. So things are different. I'm not going to deny that, but I certainly think the situations are similar. And of course, we all know what happened with Randy Moss. He kind of kept his mouth shut, and of course, that first year, I think it's first or second season there was the year they won 16-0, and of course they lost in the Super Bowl, as Patriots fans will like to forget, I'm sure. But so I don't know. Time will tell. We'll see when he starts next week. So we'll get a chance to see how much talking he does, because again, Bill Belichick, like you said, Josh, they don't put up with that sort of thing. And Tom Brady's kind of the same way. He and Belichick get along so well because they're both no nonsense sort of guys. So.
All right, enough Antonio Brown talk. It's time to get into some fun. Week 1 of the NFL. Dan, I want to start off here before we talk about the scoreboard and everything. The rookies going into this game, some notable rookies. I actually listed 3 down. You may have some others. You're welcome to share those. But I want to start off with the notable rookies, starting with TJ Hawkinson, a tight end playing for Detroit. This guy I saw on fantasy articles everywhere. You got to pick him up. And he actually did a heck of a great job. I'll tell you that from the content, the amount of the game I was watching. He had like a touchdown in that game. But he had a lot of catches. Actually, the stats right here: 6 receptions for 131 yards and a touchdown in that tie against Arizona.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was gonna bring him up too. He was great in college. I didn't get a chance to watch him play too often. He played at Iowa, but he certainly was a very talented receiver at Iowa, and surprising for a tight end. You don't see those sort of stats, Josh. 6 receptions for $131. It just doesn't happen that often. I think the key for him, and I watched the highlights of that game because I didn't get a chance to watch most of it. I went over to YouTube and found those highlights, and he was wide open in a lot of those catches. And I'm not saying that it wasn't him. He wasn't working hard to get open. I'm just saying a lot of those catches he was wide open. So I don't know if that's going to continue throughout the season, but I think he certainly is their number one receiver. Amendola also had a great game too. He also had 100 yards receiving and a touchdown as well. So Stafford's an interesting quarterback. We'll see how he's one of those guys that he's either hit or miss it. But I think Hawkinson is a big pickup for them. And I had a friend tell me before the season, TJ Hawkinson is going to be a heck of a player this year, and he's going to be a fantasy stud. So far so good, 1 week down, but he certainly impresses. And I think that's one thing the Lions were ultimately missing. They really have not had that go-to receiver really since Calvin Johnson. They haven't had that number one guy who stands alone, Josh, and he makes a big difference at the end of the day. We'll see if that continues throughout the season. But very excited for his potential. Has a huge upside, and tight end numbers like that are just so rare. So hopefully, I'm not a Lions fan, but I'd like to see him continue that production all season. Obviously, he's going to cool down in some games. But because the Lions couldn't really run the ball very well, they had to rely on the pass. Of course, Stafford threw 45 times. I think he was probably the most surprising rookie of the weekend. I apologize.
Yeah, so moving to the other side of the football for the Cardinals, Kyler Murray making his debut. Pretty small for a quarterback from what I've seen from him. He was very slow starting in the first half, heats up in the second half, and they end up going into overtime and ending in a tie. So Kyler Murray, 308 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. I did see a few batted passes at the line of scrimmage, and I do think that's because of how small he is. he's not like an average sized quarterback in the league. He's a little bit smaller, and it's his first game. So Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury, I think they're going to have a lot of growing to do together. And I did not like the fact that Cliff Kingsbury said he debuted his playbook today. Everything in preseason they didn't use in that game. They just a brand new playbook. And I was like, really?
He's just saying that to get attention, basically. Yeah, I thought Kyler played, average for a rookie. I thought he played average if you put him in there at the end, regular NFL quarterback. But, he got bailed out by Larry Fitzgerald on several throws. Larry Fitzgerald, of course, led all receivers, 113 yards and a touchdown. It's unbelievable to me that at his age, Larry Fitzgerald, still the go-to guy on this offense. And we'll see if maybe he and Kyler Murray have some sort of connection going forward. Rookie to about as veteran as you can get in the NFL. So he made some nice throws. I was watching. This was the game I said I watched the highlights on YouTube because I missed it. I wanted to see how Kyler played. The start was very rough. Like you said, he got sacked by really his own player early on in the game. I was like, oh boy, this is just a bad start. And I thought it could have been a sign of things to come. But he played well in the third and fourth quarter. Of course, 18 points for the Cardinals in the fourth to tie the game up. They were down 24-6 at that point. I think Kyler Murray is going to be about as good as he can be. I noticed, his offensive line, and Josh, you would agree, they're not good. They're straight up not good. I mean, he was getting blitzed, and he was running for his life, and it's good that he's a mobile quarterback because he's going to need that behind this offensive line. They're just not capable of blocking very well. They just don't seem to have the pieces right now to protect their franchise quarterback. So that sort of concerns me. We'll keep an eye on that going forward. But not a bad debut from Kyler Murray. I was, again, when the game started and he had a pick in the first half, I thought it's going to be a long season for the Cardinals. But give them credit. They fought back. They scored 18 unanswered points in the fourth to tie the game up. They were down 24-6 with 24-6 with, I think, about halfway through the fourth quarter. So they scored 18 points in a quick amount of time. So give them a lot of credit as well. And, the defense is about where you expect, probably in the 20 ranges. So, again, Kyler Murray, pretty decent start to the season. I think one thing he's really got to do is, especially on those throws that got batted down, he's just got to move around and get outside the main pocket. And I think that's where he's going to be lethal anyway in the NFL. So,
yeah, I said this in earlier episodes. The Cardinals are definitely going to struggle this year. So
they're rebuilding.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see how Kyler Murray can improve as a quarterback for weeks to come behind his offensive line. So definitely something to watch out for throughout the rest of this season. So the third and final rookie I wanted to spotlight for week one, he already has a nickname, Scary Terry McLaurin from Ohio State. He had 5 receptions for 125 yards and a touchdown in that Redskins loss to the Eagles, which we will get into later in depth. But Scary Terry shed a lot of characteristics like Deshaun Jackson before he went to Tampa Bay and back to Philadelphia.
Yeah, he played extremely well. I got a chance to watch the Redskins game because that was the only game we got down here during that time. But yeah, 69-yard touchdown, which was a great ball thrown by Case Keenum. Well, of course, we'll break down the Redskins game in general later on, but he certainly looks to be, for a team that coming into the season didn't have a number one receiver, especially a clear number one receiver. I think McLaren could be that guy that they go to. So
yeah, and when's the last time the Redskins had a wide receiver after Deshaun Jackson they could throw the ball
they
deep
haven't.
to?
They haven't.
I know
They haven't had
that's the
anybody.
thing.
They haven't had anybody since. Yeah, and even when they had
That's what
Deshaun
they
Jackson,
need.
well, even when they had Deshaun Jackson, I think he was past his prime. Of course, he had 154 yards himself for the Eagles. Of course, we'll break this down later. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but yeah, Case played pretty well. Again, the Redskins' defense didn't. We'll get into that later. But McLaren certainly was the player that surprised me the most, Josh, in this ball game. I think the rest of the players, you kind of have an idea of what you're going to get, of course, because they're mostly veterans. Of course, Miles Sanders, another young player for the Eagles, didn't really play well. So, yeah, he was the rookie. McLaren was the rookie in this game that I think caught people's attention. And if the Redskins can improve their offensive line, I think that's a big step for them. I mean, they've got to do it, Josh. If they're going to not only protect Case Keenum, but give their stars a chance to produce like McLaren. I think he's going to be a star receiver in the NFL at some point. Whether it's with the Redskins or not, I hate to say, but I don't know if they can have a star receiver right now with just the team makeup that they have. I guess time will tell.
Yeah, I mean, the Redskins have not had one, like I said earlier, since Deshaun Jackson. So this is really a key piece to the Redskins receiving core. So
it's early. It's early. You want to see consistency throughout the season, and of course, and we'll see if he can. You're not expecting him to get 100, 125 yards every week, but you want to see him consistently be at the top of that box score, and I think he can. But the Redskins have a tough schedule. We'll get into that later, and they may be relying on Geis a little more, who was extremely disappointing. Of course, he got injured again, I believe. I'm not sure of his status. I'm sure you know better than I do. But who knows? They may lean on the run a little more, but they may air it out to McLaren.
Yep. So that was the three rookies I felt performed the best in week one. So let's go ahead and get into our NFL week one scoreboard. Are you glad football's back? Because I am. Sunday morning, I woke up. I set up 2 TVs in my living room, one playing 4 games from Sunday Ticket and one playing another game. So I had 5 games on at once. It felt amazing. And oh, sorry, what were you going to say?
No. Finish what you were saying. You were good, giving a great speech, and I cut you off there.
So yeah, I had my 5 games on, sitting there like I do every Sunday, sitting there on the couch from about 8 a.m. watching coverage till like 12 a.m. Because that Sunday night football game lasts a pretty long time. But Dan, before we get into it, what were you gonna say?
I was just going to say that I am happy as can be that football's back. It's been such a long time since I've had this joy in my life again. My Sundays are now more fun than ever with football back. And I did the same thing. I got up early on Sunday morning, watched a lot of the early pregame shows, and then, of course, watched several of the 1 o'clock games and was checking in back and forth between the different games. So I am thrilled that football's finally here. It's been a long road. When from preseason we were so excited, but this is the real thing, and this counts, and I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right, so getting into the NFL Week 1 scoreboard, how we're going to do this, we'll give you the scores from each game. We won't go deep in depth with the stats and whatnot, but we'll give our few nuggets about how we like the game and whatnot, just to keep things running smoothly. And this is how I want to try to do this each and every week. So, because we got to give you the scores and we got to give you our opinions on it. Plain and simple, and our short, quick nuggets about the game, except for our two teams, the Redskins and the Ravens. So, starting off, Dan, we'll do the Packers and the Bears. And in this game, my short nugget on this was mostly defensive. You can tell these players were playing in a week 1 football game because it was like, they're still sort of warming up, making sure everything's good. It wasn't all score 100 points, score 5 touchdowns a game. You had Mitch Trubisky, and he did not do well. He had an interception, did not even throw a touchdown in that game. Aaron Rodgers, I'll tell you, he only had 1 touchdown, 203 yards in the first week of the season there. So, it's more like they were getting used to being back into football, but it was mostly defensive. But a cool little stat for you. This is the second time a Packers brand new head coach wins his season opener. The first coach to ever do that was Vince Lombardi.
Vince Lombardi, wow. How about that? That's a great nugget, Josh. Wow.
Really
showing me up with your research, man. I don't really have anything like that for this game, but I'll say, and I agree with what you said to start, that this looked like a week 1 first game of the season, working the kinks out. And one word to describe it would be rusty. I mean, I don't know that. Both teams just couldn't move the ball very effectively, especially the Bears. And I think that was most surprising to me because we knew coming into the game that, the Chicago's defense is going to be great this season. And giving up 10 points, you should be able to win this league. But the Bears offense just couldn't help them out. Their leading rusher only had 19 yards, Josh. So it was a very ugly game. Football purists love this kind of low-scoring game. But people are saying that Mitch Trubisky should be gone in Chicago. It's amazing how they sang his praises last season, and now week 1, Thursday night game to start the year, and they already want him gone. So maybe the Bears aren't going to be as shiny as they were last season. I still think they're a pretty good team and they have a shot at winning the division. But the Packers, I mean, they didn't play so hot either. Like you said, Rodgers had that one nice touchdown, and you kind of thought that was in the second quarter. At least I thought, okay, this is going to get into a scoring fest here, and it just never happened. And it was ugly, especially if you like watching a lot of points. This was not your favorite game. So I agree, Josh, with the way you described it. I think rusty is the best way to the best one word to use. So at the end of the day, I want to see what Mitch Trubisky can do in the coming weeks. I want to see him play better. And for the Packers, I think they'll get their offense worked out. I mean, Rodgers is Rodgers. He can, as long as he's healthy, he can do it. So,
one player I want you all to look out for in the coming weeks is David Montgomery. Just remember that name for the next coming weeks for the Bears. Moving on, the Titans and the Browns, 43-14. This is a game where, I knew it. The Browns were overhyped, and it was not a good game by the Browns. Period. I think the Titans played really, really well. And I think everybody wrote the Titans off because they were like, oh, the Browns have Baker coming on his second year. They have Odell coming, and Njoku, Jarvis Landry back, Nick Chubb, all these big names. Chubb only had 75 yards. You look at that compared to Derrick Henry's 84 yards. I mean, it was a lot. It was shown that the Tennessee Titans wanted this game more, and
Oh, they did.
it was said in the locker room afterwards. They are who they thought we were, and you can crown them now, so something like that. But the Titans wanted this game more, and they showed up to play, and they showed the Browns what they really were. But yet again, it is only week 1, so I'm excited to see if the Browns can have some better games, maybe get into a rhythm. And I'm interested
I
to
hope they
see how
don't.
Odell Beckham, Nick Chubb, and Jarvis Landry do, along with Baker Mayfield in his second year.
I'm happy that they got destroyed. I really am. I think they're humbled. Being humbled in that way is the best way to get humbled, man. I mean, they were crowned paper champions on paper. How talented that offense is. People were putting them in the Super Bowl. I'm not going to mention any particular sports personalities, but there were a lot of people who picked them. Oh, they have an easy path to the playoffs, easy path to the Super Bowl, possibly. I just didn't see it, and I said, it's a chemistry thing. But like you said, it's only week 1. It's going to be very hard for the Browns not to be successful at some point in the season. But they not only lost at home, and at the end of that game, if you watch, their stadium is empty. I was listening to a pregame show on Sirius XM. I forget which channel. I think it was the NFL channel. They had a guy on there talking about how this was one of the most anticipated opening days in Cleveland in recent memory. And of course, they just got blanked, especially in that fourth quarter. You give up 21 points in the fourth quarter to the Titans. And give the Titans credit. Everyone's talking about the Browns and how great they played. The Titans, like you said, Josh, they just had a desire. They wanted this game more. And how about Delaney Walker, Josh? Two receiving touchdowns. Delaney Walker, a long time NFL tight end. Certainly has not had the touch in recent years. He's 35 now, 14-year pro.
Tight end risers.
So we'll see if they can keep it going. I think that's a very tough division, the AFC South. But I think for the Browns, they have a lot of work to do to prove to me that they can compete not only in the AFC North but for a playoff spot as well. I just didn't see it.
Yeah, definitely a lot to work on in the coming weeks. The Browns, as you said, I believe they were definitely humbled, and they'll get back to work, and we'll see what they're made of in the next couple of weeks. Jeez, I really cannot talk tonight. I don't know why.
I can't either. Don't worry about it. It happens to the best of us.
So moving right along, this is a game that I was about to turn to until you told me the score and kept updating me, and I was like, this game isn't worth it. The Ravens stomped the Dolphins 59.
Yeah,
but
clapping on the phone.
Yes, but before I turn it over to you to give your soapbox stand, Dan, excuse me, was this a game that showed the Ravens are that good, or that the Dolphins are that bad?
I think you take both sides of this. I think the Dolphins are certainly one of the weaker teams in the AFC. Certainly in the AFC South, especially with Ryan Fitzpatrick at the helm. Which coming into that game, everyone said you're either going to have a 7-touchdown sort of game, or you're going to be absolutely horrible. So he definitely gave you the latter. I think it shows both, Josh. I think, of course, everyone's talking about Lamar Jackson and his performance, but the Dolphins just got stuffed. And offensively, they couldn't do anything. Defensively, they couldn't stop the Ravens. So I think it goes both ways. You take the good and the bad, and you take both sides of it. So that's how I feel about it. I'm content. I'm very happy with the win. I don't care who you're playing. It's still an NFL team at the end of the day. And the Dolphins, of course, like I said, are not the greatest team in the NFL, but certainly they had their opportunities to get back in the game. They just never were able to find it.
So here's a good lovable story from that game. RG3
Yeah,
and his wife gave birth to a daughter, I believe, and he went out and went 6 for 6, 55 yards and a touchdown.
yeah, he was great. He was great. That's so rare in the NFL too, that you bench your starting quarterback before they benched him late in the third quarter, which is so unheard of and so bizarre. But I think the Ravens were out to honestly to prove a point. They're not going to be the doormat of the AFC North anymore. Of course, the way the Steelers played, that really gives me hope, and every other team in our division lost. But this is a huge win, regardless of how people say the Dolphins are tanking and whatnot. But RG3 was exceptional, and I don't think a lot of people came into the season rather thinking that he would even get a chance to see that kind of action and to go 6 for 6 and have a touchdown in week 1. I think a lot of people would say, "Wow, you're pretty crazy for thinking that." So,
Dan, let me put something in perspective for you.
okay.
In 2012, Andrew Luck got drafted first.
Yes.
Then RG3 got drafted. And now it's 2019. Who would have thought that Andrew Luck would have retired and RG3 would be a backup on the Ravens and he threw a touchdown in week 1? And Andrew Luck's just at home chilling.
It's insane, and it just goes to show you that anything can happen in professional sports, right? I would have thought the other way around, and I think a lot of people would agree. RG3, especially in the first couple years, all those injuries he had, especially the ACL injury and things of that nature, a lot of people figured his career would have been cut short either way. So, the fact that he's still around and Andrew Luck, like you said, is sitting back on Sunday afternoon with a cold beverage, it's crazy, and it shows you that nothing's guaranteed in this league, and nothing's a lot of these experts, they don't know what the hell they're talking about, and at the end of the day, it's up to the players. If the players feel like they can play, even if they have injuries and stuff like that, then it is what it is. And I'm talking more about RG3, not Andrew Luck. I think his circumstances were extremely difficult. But I'm really happy for Robert Griffin III. I used to, obviously give him a considerable amount of flack because he never lived up to the potential and the hype that I think a lot of people gave him, especially you Redskins fans who thought he was the next great thing in the NFL. But I mean, he's a pretty humble guy. He obviously just had a child, and you wish the best for those types of things, and it's those type of stories, those heartwarming sort of things, and that make it all worth it in the end. So.
All right. Next game, moving right along. Not a lot to talk about on my end from this game. The Vikings beat the Falcons 28-12. I thought the Falcons were better than that. Matt Ryan had 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions.
Yeah, they weren't sharp.
I was disappointed in the Falcons. I thought they could do better, And the Vikings, thank you, Kirk. Thank you, Dalvin Cook, for getting me fantasy points.
Yeah, Dalvin Cook was huge for me. He gave me a ton of fantasy points. So I really thank him for that. I'm glad I started him. I knew he was playing in Atlanta. I know they don't have the greatest rush defense. So.
Yeah, I mean, Atlanta doesn't have the greatest team, but I expected this to be a very close game. And
no, I totally agree.
It obviously wasn't. Atlanta put up all 12 of their points in the fourth quarter. And I was like, wow, Atlanta looks terrible.
And by then it was too late. By
Yeah.
then they were down 28-0 going into the fourth quarter. So
They only had
yeah,
73 total rush yards combined. So
yeah,
that's just some looking for week 2. They gotta make some changes. I'll tell you that.
yeah. It starts. They threw it a lot. Matt Ryan threw it 46 times. Obviously had the 2 interceptions. Still threw for over 300 yards. I think. I don't know if Devontae Freeman's the guy. I don't know if he's they're really their top guy. I know he's supposed to be, but yeah, that was disappointing. As disappointing as you can get. And but the Falcons got to give them credit, or Falcons, the Vikings, you got to give them credit. Kirk Cousins, 8 of 10, 98 yards and a touchdown. You didn't have to put up a bunch of points in this game, but the the Vikings really made sure they ran the football, and of course Dalvin Cook with 2 scores helps the situation. And Kirk Cousins added the other one. I think it was on a QB sneak. So, Minnesota did what they had to do, and their defense played pretty well. They're not getting enough credit. They have a pretty solid defense in the grand scheme of things. Yeah, the Falcons. That's surprising. That's surprising. We'll see if especially when they get in those AFC South games. There's some pretty solid teams. There's some pretty bad teams in the AFC South. So we'll see if they can get any better. But yeah, I'm not a Matt Ryan fan. I never have been. But I'm not gonna. I think he had a couple interceptions that were really bad. So you really, especially for a guy who's been in the league that long, 11th season now, 11th season. No, 12th season. I apologize. I'll get it right one of these times. He was taken in the same draft as Broncos star quarterback Joe Flacco. But yeah, he's definitely got to get better. I don't know who their number one guy is. I suppose it's still Julio Jones. He caught a touchdown pass, or no, he didn't. Yeah, he did. Sorry. The Calvin Ridley caught a touchdown as well, but their other receivers didn't play well. Hooper, he had 9 catches. He's a tight end, of course. He was their leading receiver. So that just goes to show you the Vikings played some really solid defense, and they really earned this victory.
Yeah, definitely they earned the victory, and the Vikings look out for Kirk Cousins, and if Dalvin Cook can stay healthy, I think he has a good shot of being their RB number 1. So moving right along, I'm sorry, what?
I just said he deserves it. I mean, he's going to be that guy. He's going to be that guy.
Yeah. So moving right along, this is a game I really did not flip to because of the score of 16-0. The Jets and the Bills. And then it ends up the Bills win by a point. And I'm like, how did that happen? So I really didn't watch much of the game, but I will give you a stat on the new Le'Veon Bell playing for the New York Jets, because Le'Veon Bell's back. 17 carries for 60 yards. I won't really say much, but Josh Allen bringing his team back 17-16. That looks really good. And
yeah,
that gives the Bills some momentum going into next week, and hopefully they can carry that a long way.
And the Jets looked like they were going to run away with it early on, especially in the first quarter. They had the interception for a touchdown. The Jets defense did to start the game off. So I kind of felt like when I saw that little highlight, I was like, oh man, the Jets are going to crush the Bills today. But give the Bills credit. They did what they had to do. Josh Allen also ran for a touchdown as well as throwing for a touchdown in that fourth quarter. So that was huge. One of them, of course, was a 38-yard touchdown. As much as this, you talk about the Browns being hyped up, but the Jets were also extremely hyped up coming into the season. I felt was a lot of talk about how great the Jets were going to be, how they had a shot to maybe challenge the Patriots. You can't blow a lead like that in the fourth quarter. I'm sorry, you just can't. You can't be up 16-3 and then blow it. It's inexcusable, and especially at home. You know, the Jets fans should return their season tickets. No, I'm just kidding. It's only week one. But Sam Darnold, I mean, he played decently well for a young quarterback. Le'Veon Bell didn't impress me at all. He only had 60 yards on 17 carries. So we'll see. I mean, I always say we'll see. I say that way too often. I got to think of another word. That division is going to be interesting underneath New England, I think, because I think everyone is kind of in consensus. They're going to win 13 or 14 possible games. So it's interesting to see who falls in line behind them. And I really thought the Jets had the best shot. It still could happen. Like we said at the beginning of the preseason, really, divisional games, most of them you can flip a coin, and it could go either way. So that's the way I feel about it.
All right. Moving on to the next game, I will be talking mostly about this, and you can chime in whenever. But the Redskins 27, the Eagles 32 in their season opener. A lot of change for the Washington Redskins, obviously. Case Keenum coming in from Denver, and you have Darius Geis, who's playing as well. So two names I was sort of excited to get to see on the field. Geis, I mean, he was all right. I didn't even realize he was injured till like a day after the game. So
he didn't play well.
He only had 18 carries.
Yeah, 18 yards.
18 yards, excuse me, on 10 carries. Case Keenum played exceptionally well. All the fans out there who are saying, "Oh, bench Keenum, let's start Dwayne Haskins because we blew a 17-7, excuse me, a 10-7 lead going into what was it? 17-7? I think it was either 10 or 17-7.
I have an injury update on Darius Geis. Do you have the latest?
Give it to us.
They think he may have sprained his ACL possibly.
Oh, great.
He didn't tear it. They don't think he didn't tear it. They said he's gonna miss some time. They don't know how long. Hopefully he won't need surgery, but the team is going to do a full evaluation. That's Ian Rappaport on Twitter. Thank you for that. That came out yesterday. I hadn't heard anything, but yeah, it looks like he's going to miss some time. That's not a great thing because the Redskins, they need some help in the running game. I don't know if Thompson can get it done or not, but sorry, I cut you off. You were talking and I just saw the injury update, so I thought I'd try to update you real quick.
No, we do appreciate the last second updates there to the minute. But anyways, this game really opens up criticism for Jay Gruden on why he left Adrian Peterson as a healthy scratch. For crying out loud. I mean, we need all the running help we can get. And all we run is Darius Geis and Chris Thompson. This game is my blame is fully on Jay Gruden. He did not make the adjust. He started off, screwed it up by healthy scratch Adrian Peterson. Then at halftime, he makes absolutely no adjustments. The Eagles coach, Doug Peterson, he knows how to make adjustments. Jay Gruden doesn't. We end up scoring 7 points in the fourth quarter, in the third and fourth quarter combined. The Eagles come back 14 points and 11 points, 32-27 final score. This game is fully on Jay Gruden, and it doesn't help that Jonathan Allen got injured, but I do respect the fact that they held him out to so he wouldn't get hurt more. There were some positive things I saw from the game. Vernon Davis, my gosh, like he leaps over. How old is Vernon Davis? Like in his 40s, maybe. I'm not sure, but an amazing hurdle,
35.
and they just can't stop him. He hurdles over the defenders and they don't even tackle him. He runs in the end zone for a touchdown. Emotional game for Vernon Davis because his grandfather who raised him died the day before. So
Yeah.
Prayers up to Vernon Davis. But there was a lot I saw. Trey Quinn, he looked pretty good. Scary Terry McLaurin, you got to watch out for him. That's got to be your number one receiver by the way he has played week one. But
well, all these guys, Quinn, Richardson, Harmon, never heard of those guys before.
Paul Richardson used to play for the Seahawks.
Okay, I have heard of him. I couldn't remember his first name. So
yeah, but anyways, I mean, a lot of good on the offense that needs to be improved. Hopefully by firing Jay Gruden in the near future. Then the defense looked all right. Quentin Dunbar played pretty good as long as he stopped mouthing off to Deshaun Jackson. But then you have Josh Norman. He's still doing his same stuff, like Deshaun Jackson burned him like 2 times, I believe. I'm not sure, but that's all I'm going to say about the Redskins. I could ramble on all night, but we have more NFL scores to get to. The Eagles played well. Carson Wentz back, hasn't played since December. I really liked what he had to bring to the table. And Deshaun Jackson back in an Eagles uniform, and I think that was really great.
Forged your Redskins secondary. I'll tell you, the Redskins, it's just, I've never watched a team that from one half to the next, they look like two completely different teams.
Typical Redskins.
They came out of that game, had a 17-7 lead, or 20-7 at halftime. My friend was like, he's a Redskins fan, so he was all hyped up. And I said, this is the Redskins we're talking about. So just hold your horses on that.
And you were right.
And I was right. I didn't think it would happen in that fashion, especially the third quarter has not been the Redskins' quarter for I don't know how many years, in consecutive years now. They give up 14 in that quarter. Carson Wentz, just had his way in the third quarter. It was almost like the Redskins' defense just kind of gave up. I know they didn't, but my goodness, Josh Norman, you're right, Josh. He was on the receiving end of getting burned so many times. It made my head spin. But the Eagles just did what they wanted to do on offense, and the Redskins had no answer. And the Redskins' offense was just put in a really tough spot. Of course, they didn't play particularly well coming out of the gate in the third quarter. They punted mostly. There were no turnovers in this game, which I think was probably the most surprising thing out of all of it.
Case Keenum didn't throw a pick. He looked great.
Yeah, he played very well. Almost 400 yards. So you got to be pleased with that, especially for when people were saying they should start Dwayne Haskins, which they shouldn't.
Absolutely not.
I think Keenum pretty much made clear, I'm the starter. Here's my best shot. So. The Redskins, they got to get that. They got to get the run going, and I think it's very important for them to do so. They're not going to be a winning organization this season. So, and back to your Jay Gruden point, I've been saying for the last 3 or 4 years, Jay Gruden should have been gone by now. I just don't think he's a very good coach. Poor clock management, poor decision making. Seems to prime example seems to kind of let up in the second half and let teams get back or even take the lead like the Eagles did. So yeah, I don't know if you blame this completely on Jay Gruden, but certainly he has to take full responsibility being the head coach. And I think he knows that he's on the hot seat, especially this season. We'll see how it plays out. And the Redskins, I don't see them. I see them finishing at best 8-8, but at the worst 6-10, maybe 5-11 at the end of this. And Jay Gruden's butt will be out the door.
Yeah. It's going to be a rocky road for the Redskins and Redskins fans, but
they've got some talent on offense though, and that's the one thing they haven't had in recent years, especially in the passing game. McLaren looked really good. He looks like he can be a stud in this league, but like I said, if they can't run the football, it's not going to matter. That's the first thing you got to do, and regardless of what people say, it being a passing league and all, running the football is the first step, and the Redskins weren't able to do that, and hopefully they can improve and start to run the ball more effectively, especially with Geis. Hopefully he comes back and he's healthy.
Yeah, so we're going to take a quick break here, going into some fantasy football talk. Then Dan and myself will wrap things up right after this. You're listening to the Josh Kirby on Sports podcast.
Hey guys, welcome back. This is Jason Kimlowski with Dynasty Football Digest. Just want to thank Josh for having me on. This is a new segment I believe we're going to try to do each week where I recap some things I saw from a fantasy perspective in the previous week, maybe go over some matchups to exploit for the next week, talk about some waiver wire pickups, maybe some injury news. Again, you can catch me at Jason Kimlowski on Twitter. I tweet about my day job as a principal of a high school. Tweet about fantasy football related information for the Dynasty Football Digest website, and also Prospects Live for baseball. If you're still working your way through baseball season, if you're fantasy baseball playoffs, we're still pumping out content every day, talking prospects over there. So you can catch me at any of those three platforms. As far as week one in the NFL from a fantasy standpoint, I think we got to begin at the quarterback position this week and talk about Lamar Jackson and Dak Prescott. Now, I'll start out with Lamar. 17-20, 324 yards, 5 touchdowns. Incredible day for Lamar Jackson. Efficiency, obviously, through the roof. 85% passer. Took advantage of a terrible Miami secondary. Just absolutely washed on the back end. Had a couple big hookups with Marquise Brown. But again, this is kind of the problem with Lamar Jackson is that the 20 pass attempts, that's about where he's going to settle in each week. Luckily, last week we kind of caught a ceiling game from him with the 324 yards and the 5 TDs. And I do think that Lamar is going to make some major strides this year as far as being a more complete passer. And, I think he was very underrated in that department coming out of college. When he was in Louisville, he was better, I think, than people gave him credit for coming out. But the thing with Lamar that he did not give us on Sunday was the rushing yardage. I think he had 3 carries for 6 yards. I think the weekly floor that we should expect most weeks for Lamar Jackson in terms of running the football is probably 30 or 40 yards. And I think, most weeks you're going to feel pretty safe with plugging that into your lineup. So, the efficiency with the passing game is great, but to expect him to throw for 5 touchdowns every week is just completely unreasonable. But Lamar, again, one of those guys that you could have waited until the double-digit rounds to probably pick up in your fantasy draft. And obviously in week one, you kind of got rewarded if you were able to draft him and put him on your team. I would definitely be possibly, he plays the Cardinals this week, another great matchup. I mean, obviously, the Cardinals are going to play fast. Have an opportunity to get a lot of snaps in against Arizona. If he has another one of these, these crazy high-scoring weeks, might be a time to look at maybe to sell super high on Lamar Jackson after this week. But we'll see what happens on Sunday. I would definitely plug him in. He's a plug-and-play this week, easy QB1 for me. Hopefully we get some more of that rushing yardage. But again, just got to like what you saw in the passing game. Had a great connection, obviously, like I said, with Hollywood Brown, and just really looked comfortable in the pocket. But again, you also got to take into consideration the fact that he was playing arguably the worst football team in the NFL. Moving on to Dak Prescott again. Another crazy efficient game, 78% passer on Sunday, 405 yards, 4 touchdowns. And I really think what you saw from Dak, especially early in the season, might be normal with Kellen Moore calling the offense now. I think what you're seeing there, especially with Zeke kind of working his way back into shape, and they've really added some weapons there. Amari Cooper has been a real boost to Dak's numbers. He's been a top 10 QB, I think 8 of 9 weeks since Amari Cooper was brought over in that trade last year. And then you add, Michael Gallup, who had a big week, and even Randall Cobb got in on the action. And if Cobb can prove to be, strong in the slot, that'll just give, Dak Prescott another option in that passing game. And what we'll start to look at is, the question I think we have to ask ourselves with Dak is, as Zeke gets into shape, as Zeke is able to, handle more of a workload, will the Cowboys continue to throw the ball the way they did on Sunday? 32 pass attempts for Dak Prescott is probably towards the upper end of what we can expect on a weekly basis if Zeke is getting 20, 25 touches. But it's possible that Kellen Moore is gonna install more of a passing offense to try to take advantage of some of these guys they have on the outside with Gallup and Cooper. Dak, I would say in some leagues, possibly even went, undrafted. You might have been able to get him on the waiver wire this week. And, again, another great example of, why waiting on quarterbacks sometimes is the best move. And, just to touch on a couple other, kind of ceiling games from guys who were pretty unlikely to be drafted. Andy Dalton goes out to Seattle and throws 51 passes and, 418 yards and, the 2 touchdowns to John Ross. And then Case Keenum just absolutely blows up in Philadelphia, which I don't know that many people were expecting that. He had the long touchdown pass to Terry McLaurin and, Case Keenum, again, 44 pass attempts, which I think, you might see a lot of that in Washington because they're going to play from behind a lot. But, this is the danger with drafting a guy like Pat Mahomes early, is that, when you look at, Sunday, and Mahomes had a good game, 378 yards, 3 touchdowns. But when you look at what Sunday, Dalton, Prescott, Case Keenum, guys that either weren't drafted or drafted super late, I'll outperform Mahomes. And while over a season, Pat Mahomes is going to put up better numbers than all of those guys, the danger with drafting a guy like Pat Mahomes in the second or third round is that you almost have to make up ground in such a huge way in these other positions, because with the way the quarterback scoring is. Now, if you're in a league, that awards 1 point per 10 yards for passing and 6 points for a passing touchdown, that's a different story. I mean, I think there's a strong case to be made for Patrick Mahomes being, a first or second round pick even. But in most leagues where they award a point per 20 or a point per 25 yards and 4 points for a passing touchdown, I think it's harder to make the case that Mahomes should be one of those early picks. But if you paid the full freight on a guy like Mahomes, you've got to plug and play him every week. And not to say you should be upset with having to play Patrick Mahomes. That's never going to be the case. But I think roster construction gets a lot harder whenever we make that decision. But again, as we keep looking down the list, Drew Brees, another incredible night, 370 yards, 2 touchdown passes. Had the big drive there at the end to get the Will Lutz field goal, which, how about Will Lutz, right? That field goal would have been good from 65. I mean, easy. But just, Breeze kind of doing what he does. And, on the other side of that game, Deshaun Watson put up some big numbers too. And of course, he had the rushing touchdown to go with 268 yards and 3 touchdowns. So just a lot of big time passing performances this week. I think there were probably some under the radar passing performances. Phillip Rivers, 333 yards and 3 touchdowns. Even Matt Stafford, 385 yards and 3 touchdowns out in Arizona. So, quarterback is just so deep that I think, and I'm going to talk about a couple waiver wire pickups here towards the end, but, quarterback is just such a deep position. And that's what we talked about last week with Josh. With Andrew Luck going out, you don't have to hit the panic button. There's plenty of quarterbacks out there. Gardner Minshew from Jacksonville, came in 22 of 25 for 275 and 2 touchdowns, and that's completely cold off the bench. Obviously in a game where the game script got away from Jacksonville and they had to throw, but for him to come out and be an 88% passer, just shows that you can get you can get a lot of quarterbacks, even off the waiver wire that can help your team. So, but again, if you're a Lamar owner, if you're a Dak owner, if you're a Drew Brees owner, even Tom Brady, who it seems like every year, just goes completely unnoticed on draft day, you've got to be pretty happy with week one. And I really think that, in general, these quarterbacks are going to keep putting up points because just the way the game is being played, in today's NFL. Now, moving on to the running back position, only 5 running backs cleared 100 yards rushing in week one. And that was headed up by Marlon Mack, who, Mack coming into the year was a guy that I wasn't super high on. I mean, losing Luck was hard enough, but then, I've never been a Marlon Mack fan because it just seems like he's so one-dimensional. You're right. He just, he doesn't catch a whole lot of balls out of the backfield. It seemed like if the Colts got behind, he was kind of game scripted out. But in this game, even despite the fact that and the Colts were in the game, but Mack gets 25 carries, $174, and the 1 touchdown. I was hoping to see him catch a couple passes anyways because the rumor out of camp was that he was prepared for a 3-down roll. Whether or not that Frank Reich kind of makes that decision and gets the ball in his hands in that capacity is another story. But you got to be encouraged with what you saw from Marlon Mack. 7 yards per touch on Sunday for a guy that probably prior to that was taking a hit with Luck being, I think you had to downgrade the Colts offense altogether with Luck being, retiring. So real encouraging from Marlon Mack. Mark Ingram, another guy, kind of like Lamar Jackson, just 14 carries, but 107 yards, 2 touchdowns, crazy efficiency. Had a big 50-yard run in the first quarter. Have to like what you saw out of Mark Ingram, and I think that Ravens offense is it's going to be a little tough to project from week to week because I do think Justice Hill is going to be a factor, and even Gus Edwards I think got at least 4 carries from inside the 20-yard line. Now that could have been entirely game script, when they get up by 30 or 40 points, they might have been trying to get work for a guy like Gus Edwards and save Mark Ingram, when you're up by that many scores. But I don't know that Mark Ingram is going to be one of these, 25 or even 20 touch guys. He might settle in closer to, a guy who's a 15 to 18 touch guy. But Mark Ingram can be effective as a 15 to 18 touch guy. I mean, there's no reason why, he can't rush for, on 15 carries, he can't get you 70 yards and hopefully a touchdown if he can get some red zone carries. I think from an efficiency standpoint, though, if you're looking for a guy that's going to be a 20 carry back, that's just not him. Moving on to a couple other guys that I really liked on Sunday. Christian McCaffrey's incredible. He is, I think, I had Saquon number 1 in my rankings, and Saquon had a great game himself. But Christian McCaffrey just goes out and balls, man. Catches the ball in the backfield. 128 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. I mean, he is the Carolina offense. That Carolina offense at times on Sunday was just so bad. Cam just didn't look right. The wide receivers couldn't get anything going. I mean, Curtis Samuel, I had him everywhere on DraftKings and FanDuel, and just really disappointing, even considering the price. But Christian McCaffrey, I mean, just absolutely blew this thing up on Sunday and really kept them in the game for the most part. So, if you picked him, in one of those top 3 picks, you got to be happy with you got out of Christian McCaffrey. Dalvin Cook, another guy, he got 20 carries. The Vikings only threw the ball 10 times on Sunday, which, you listen to Mike Zimmer talk about it, and he said, we get up by 21, 28 points. He said there's really no reason to throw the ball. And that's kind of Mike Zimmer's thing. Like, they're going to run the ball. They're going to play defense, try to shorten the game. He is a big established run guy. Dalvin Cook, if he stays healthy, I mean, I think he's a guy that you could see get 25 touches a game. And if you spread that out over 16 games, I mean, Dalvin Cook has a chance to be the RB1 for this year. Whether or not he can get there will be, will be dependent a lot on his health and will be dependent a lot on, if he continues to get work in the passing game. But I really think that Dalvin Cook is going to be a worthwhile investment for anybody that was able to get their hands on him. Now, moving down, again, Alvin Kamara, kind of like McCaffrey with Kamara, man. I mean, he just balls. 97 yards rushing. Chipped in, I think, another 80 on the ground or in the passing game. I mean, he's just so explosive with the ball in his hands. And he's a guy that really, when he's on the field, you want to see him with the ball in his hands. Just a super exciting guy to watch. Todd Gurley, a very quiet 14-carry, 97-yard game in Carolina. Got vultured on 2 touchdowns by Malcolm Brown, but again, got to be a little bit encouraged with Gurley averaging 7 yards a catch, and he was also the guy that they put the ball, in his hands when they were trying to kill the clock. Josh Jacobs, really good performance on Monday night against Denver. Got to like what you saw to him with the 2 touchdowns. Again, he's another guy. It looks like he's going to get, that 20-plus touch role, 23 carries. Derrick Henry, huge game on Sunday, not just rushing the football, but also had the big 75-yard screenplay where he kind of did all the work there for Mariota on the touchdown pass. And Cleveland, goodness. And I said in the last pod, be careful with Cleveland. You invest heavily in that team, and you pay the price that you're going to have to pay to get those guys. You're going to need ceiling games from them a good bit. Wow. Tennessee just went in there and took it to them. But, so David Johnson, another guy, first-round pick for a lot of people. I know I invested in him pretty heavily, especially towards the end of draft season, was able to get him, towards the end of the first round in some drafts. Working the passing game, 82 yards rushing, 18 carries. He's another guy. Looks like he's going to get 20-plus touches. The corpse of Carlos Hyde, 83 yards on Monday night. Looks like he's going to be a thorn in the side of the Duke Johnson owners. But then we start moving down to some more. Well, one other guy I want to touch on, Austin Eckler. And Austin Eckler just, absolutely had a huge game Sunday afternoon. Three total touchdowns, 2 in the passing game. With the news today of Hunter Henry going down, looks like Austin Eckler's target share actually might go up in this offense. If you go into the next gen stats and you look at some things with the Chargers, when their tight ends are out, they throw the ball 5% more of the time to the running back position. So Eckler should be in line for even more work this week. And I'd be more than willing to saddle him up as an RB1. Duke Johnson only got 9 carries, but again, got a lot of work in the passing game, which is to be expected because that's kind of what he does. Nick Chubb, disappointing. 75 yards, wasn't really able to get anything going, only averaged 4.4 yards per carry. Leonard Fournette, as I talked about with Gardner Minshew, he kind of got game scripted out. Only finished the game with 66 yards, didn't get a ton of work in the passing game. I'd look for him to bounce back moving forward. Malcolm Brown, talked about him a little bit. Looks like the Rams might be content to get him somewhere between 8 to 12 touches a game, which should be good for anywhere between 50 and 60 yards with a couple catches, maybe a touchdown. Definitely a serviceable flex play. Zeke Elliott, working his way back into game shape, did have 53 yards and a touchdown. I don't think there's any question that Zeke, once he's 100%, once he's full go, he'll definitely be a top 4 running back. Not too worried about him. Kerryon Johnson, another guy, didn't quite have the rushing numbers that we thought, only 3.1 yards per carry. Looks like C.J. Anderson did get some work as well on Sunday. But I do think Kerryon's going to be the back to own in Detroit. Hopefully they can get him the ball a little bit more in the passing game. And Chris Carson is the other guy I wanted to touch on. And Pete Carroll had said that he was going to get more work in the passing game. Carson, I believe, had 6 catches, which would really be a positive sign for him moving forward, because in that offense, volume for the running back is everything. They want to run the football, but again, he's another guy that only averaged 3.1 yards per carry. Did chip in 46 yards and a touchdown on the ground. But again, the fact that Carson was active in the passing game is good for his value moving forward. At the running back position, and again, we're seeing it already. Some of these guys are already starting to get banged up. Joe Mixon went down on Sunday with an ankle sprain. Looks like he's day to day. Not sure if he's going to suit up this weekend. If he doesn't, fire up Giovanni Bernard. It looks like James Conner has an illness right now. Now, I would be shocked if James Conner doesn't play this weekend. But again, it looks like he might be a little bit limited throughout the week. Tevin Coleman, high ankle sprain, looks like he's going to be out. Matt Breida will be the workhorse back there. It seems like Matt Breida is just waiting to bust out. I said on the last pod not to leave your draft without Matt Breida. It's going to be his time to shine. Darius Geis apparently hurt the other knee. Adrian Peterson, surprisingly, on Sunday morning was ruled out. Just a team decision. But with Geis going down, Peterson will be back in. I do think Chris Thompson in the PPR is the back to own in Washington. But again, they're going to be behind. And I think it's going to be tough for AP to get enough work. So Thompson would definitely be the back that I want there. Moving on to the wide receiver position, Sammy Watkins, huge game, 9 catches, 198 yards, 3 touchdowns. Tyreek Hill, looks like he's going to be out for a couple weeks. Sammy Watkins, crazy talented. It's just a matter of health. If he stays healthy in that offense, Andy Reid, obviously creative enough to get into football in different ways. He can play outside, he can play in the slot. I would say, you can look at firing up Sammy Watkins right now as a wide receiver 1. Some surprising names here at the top, though. John Ross, 7 catches on 12 targets for 158 yards. And John Ross left a ton of yards on the field. I mean, John Ross could have had a 200-yard day in Seattle. Had a few drops, left some yards on the field, but just an absolute career day. I don't know that Andy Dalton's going to be throwing the ball 51 times a game like he did on Sunday, and I don't know if Ross is going to get 12 targets, but there's been some reports that maybe Ross is going to fill that Brandon Cooks role in Zach Taylor's offense. So, you could do worse as a waiver wire pickup there for John Ross. Talk a little bit about Michael Gallup, 7 catches, 158 yards. Gallup was a monster. I know a lot of people have pegged him as a breakout star this year. Again, Marquise Brown, 4 catches, 147 yards, only on 5 targets. DJ Shark, 4 catches, 146 yards, 1 touchdown again, just 4 targets. Terry McLaurin, 5 catches, 125 yards. And again, McLaurin's another guy. He could have had a 200-yard day too. There was a 73-yard pass play that should have been a touchdown where he got overthrown. McLaurin, honestly, coming out of Ohio State, a guy on our site, he was much higher on McLaurin than he was on Paris Campbell. And I thought he was nuts. But it's looking like McLaurin is definitely the wide receiver to own of the two. And, I mean, if Case Keenum can get it done with Terry McLaurin, it'd be interesting to see if he and Dwayne Haskins, once Haskins is able to play, because I don't think there's any way Keenum keeps that job all year. But it'll be interesting to see if him and Dwayne Haskins can keep doing what they did last year at Ohio State. But again, rookie receivers just really, had some big games. And also we know we had some second-year guys with Shark and Gallup kind of getting going. And then we get to some of the more usual suspects. Of course, we've got Keenan Allen, 8 for $123 and a touchdown. Michael Thomas, 10 catches for 123 yards, just a PPR monster. DeAndre Hopkins, 8 catches, 111 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's on 13 targets. Evan Ingram is actually, and we'll talk about tight ends here in a minute, but Evan Ingram, I believe, is your target leader for the first week with 14 targets. Moving on down to Amari Cooper, 6 catches, 106 yards, and a touchdown. Tyrell Williams, big-time waiver pickup this week. I do think if you're in a competitive league, he was probably picked up as soon as Antonio Brown was released, with 6 catches for 105 yards and a touchdown. And again, Danny Amendola, 13 targets, 7 catches, 104 yards and a touchdown. If you look, at the receiving numbers, we talked there was only 5 running backs with a 100-yard game. The numbers for wide receivers, there was over 20 receivers with a 100-yard game on Sunday. So that you can just kind of see there, the way the game's going. And, we start looking at some of this stuff and, you start projecting some of these things out. There were 5 different receivers who caught multiple touchdown passes. I'm sorry, 8 different receivers who caught multiple touchdown passes. And that includes, T.Y. Hilton. And, even Philip Dorsett had 2 touchdowns. So, passing game is definitely, king right now in the NFL. And there's just, it's kind of like quarterback. There's so many good guys that you can go out there and get. John Ross was on the waiver wire in my biggest league. Cortland Sutton, because I dropped him because I'm an idiot, was also on the waiver wire in my biggest league. Tyrell Williams was until Saturday morning, and somebody picked him up. But even Ted Ginn got into the act with 7 catches on it for 101 yards. And some of these guys are not going to do this week in, week out. But I think when we look at targets, and I'm sorry, the target leader for the week is Jamison Crowder, 17, 14 catches, 99 yards. I mean, that is like the most insane line I've ever seen. 7.1 yards per catch. I mean, his ADOT is so low. And Jamison Crowder is why people hate PPR, because Jamison Crowder had a 23-point week in a PPR, and he didn't clear 100 yards or score a touchdown. So I get it. You people that are out there screaming about PPR leagues, I get it. But Jamison Crowder, good at the game. Christian McCaffrey, 10 catches for 81 yards. I mean, he's a wide receiver 1 wrapped up in a running back 1's body. But going back to wide receivers, Deshaun Jackson, 8 catches, 150 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, who didn't see that coming, But I think with a lot of these receivers, I think Watkins can stay. I mean, he's going to stay on this pace, especially as long as Tyreek Hill's out. I think Michael Gallup is going to be. I mean, I think Michael Gallup has a chance to have a monster year if Kellen Moore keeps his foot down on the gas pedal with his passing game. And I'm talking guys that aren't the usual suspects. I'm not talking about the Nook Hopkins and the Michael Thomases and the Keenan Allens of the world. I'm talking about some of these guys that were either not drafted or were drafted late. Maybe guys are questionable starts for the first week. John Brown looks like his skill set's going to mesh well with Josh Allen in Buffalo, 7 catches, $123 and a touchdown. So there's a lot of big performances on Sunday. Moving to tight end, T.J. Hawkinson, 6 catches, $131 and a touchdown on 9 targets. Hawkinson coming out, some people were comparing him, saying he was the most talented tight end prospect since Gronk, and I mean, I tend to agree, because he's in that Detroit offense. It's not like he's in this high volume passing game, right? But for him to just go down there and just ball out from game 1, and I don't know that we can expect 6 catches for 131 yards moving forward, but for him to be able to get his numbers like that, in week 1, I think says a lot about who he is. And I think there were some questions maybe about how they would use him, but with 9 targets, I mean, he's going to be involved every week. Evan Ingram, again, insane volume, and this has kind of been his thing. When Odell Beckham Jr. is not playing, Ingram's splits are crazy. He tends to get targeted a ton, and really it's just a matter of his route tree kind of fits what Eli Manning's able to do. I mean, Eli Manning can't push the ball down the field, so he's going to throw these short and intermediate routes that Evan Ingram's going to haul in. I mean, he averaged 10 yards a catch, but 11 catches, 116 yards and a touchdown. I mean, it's just a monster day. But he's going to get this type of volume, especially it seems like the Giants right now are going to funnel volume to Barkley, Ingram, and Sterling Shepard. Now, once Golden Tate comes back, there's another mouth to feed. But for the first 4 weeks, man, eat it up with Evan Ingram, because you're going to consistently get, I think, games like this. I mean, he's going to get double-digit targets every week, so enjoy that while you can. Mark Andrews, another guy was high on this preseason, 8 catches, 108 yards and a touchdown. Actually had a Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews stack on DraftKings on Sunday, and at 12:57 switched that to Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham. I am regret. Travis Kelce, only 3 catches for 88 yards, but got targeted 8 times. I think Kelce's going to be the tight end for me this week in DFS. The 8 targets is healthy. Tyreek Hill, I think Kelce's probably going to get double-digit targets this week. It wouldn't be surprised to me if he finishes the tight end 1 this week. Austin Hooper, again, doing Austin Hooper things. 9 catches, 77 yards, 8.6 yards catch. That's kind of a very Austin Hooper number, but kind of the guy, and Trey Tyndall on our site has been kind of hyping this guy all offseason, is Darren Waller from the Raiders. 7 catches, 70 yards, 10 yards a catch. He was involved early. I think he had 3 receptions on the first drive for the Raiders the other night. He was involved early. They kept him involved throughout the game. Sounds like Gruden loves him. Darren Waller is going to be a factor this year, and I think a lot of people started to get on him at the end of draft season, so he may not have been quite as available as maybe he would have been back in June. But Waller's a guy, in that offense again. It's they don't have a whole lot of options. I mean, they got Josh Jacobs, they got Tyrell Williams, they got Darren Waller, but Derek Carr has the ability to get these guys the ball. So, I think we could be looking at, another Jared Cook type situation with Darren Waller. I mean, that might be the floor for him, because there's just nobody else to throw the ball to in that offense. And if Darren Waller can get that type of volume that Jared Cook got last year, I mean, we could really be talking about one of the better values at the tight end position this year. So, another good week, or a good first week for Darren Waller. Now, going through some injuries right now. We talked about the running back position. At wide receiver, looks like Devin Funchess is out for the year. I think the speculative add there for me would be Deion Kane. Tyreek Hill, another guy, looks like he's going to be out for at least 8 weeks. Looks like they might put him on IR. Mecole Hardman, who was second-round pick for them for the Chiefs this year, is obviously the priority add there. Juju Smith-Schuster, hurt his toe. Looks like he's going to be okay, good to go for week 2 for their home opener against the Seahawks. Juju, not a great game on Sunday. And honestly, let's just talk briefly about the Steelers. Go up to Foxborough, no clue, terrible game plan. Dante Moncrief is he's dropping everything. I'm surprised he caught the plane home. Just a bad night for the Steelers. Ben, this is what Ben does. In the second half, whenever they're down by 20, he starts taking these shots down the field to try to make something happen, and it just wasn't working. You never want to think, I guess, that maybe this team was just completely overrated. But Juju did not look great. Stephon Gilmore kind of beat him up all night. James Conner couldn't get anything going. I mean, Vance McDonald was non-existent, which is disappointing. Moncrief, like I said, he dropped everything that was thrown to him, and James Washington really just didn't look like he was ready for prime time. So the Steelers have some work to do. They get a Seattle team coming in this week. Not sure what to expect there. Seattle doesn't play as well away from home, so at least the Steelers, get them at Heinz Field. Obviously Seattle just gave up a ton of yards to Andy Dalton, a lot of volume there. I'd be interested to see what the Steelers decide to do if they put the ball in Ben's hands and, say, hey, let's try to win us the game there, or they kind of lean on James Conner. But either way, just a complete mess of a situation Sunday night in Foxborough for the Steelers. Looking at some other things for this week, I did my waiver wire pickups. Obviously for the quarterback position, I think it was pretty cut and dried. We talked about Case Keenum a little bit. Marcus Mariota had a really good day in the second half against the Browns. He was pretty mediocre in the first half, just 105 yards on 8 of 15 passing, but he did bounce back big time in the second half. Of course, that screen pass to Derrick Henry had a lot to do with that, but he added 24 yards on the ground, which is what you're going to get with Mariota, and I think. I'm always going to advocate for running quarterbacks because their floor is just usually so much better than, a guy who doesn't contribute anything there. But I think in Mariota's case, this is a guy that I'm willing to bet on talent because I think he's better than what he's shown. The thing about him is, it's just not a high volume passing game, and when you have a quarterback that isn't getting 30 attempts. It makes them hard to trust. But again, if you're looking for someone to come in and you don't really have a contingency plan for luck yet, I mean, you could do worse than Mariota. And then obviously Dalton and Gardner Minshew would be the other two quarterbacks that I would look to pick up. Running back, Malcolm Brown. We've already talked about him. Gio Bernard, especially if Joe Mixon's out. Talked about Chris Thompson. Two guys are really Ronald Jones II. And Rex Burkhead, but Ronald Jones had 93 total yards against the 49ers, and he out-touched Peyton Barber 14-10. Now, the interesting thing about Ronald Jones here is he actually got the least number of actual snaps of the Tampa Bay running backs, but he looked the best of the three. I would be looking to add Ronald Jones as a speculation ad. I think the Buccaneers are in for a long year. They looked absolutely horrific on Sunday. Between them and the Dolphins, I mean, two of the worst teams in the NFL are within, a couple hundred miles of each other maybe. I think Jones is probably going to be the one who, the back down there, is more likely to get most of the work, especially because it looks like he can do more in the passing game. And then our old friend Rex Burkhead. Without Rob Gronkowski in that offense, and of course I know they just signed Antonio Brown, but as of this recording, it's hard to say what's going to happen with him with some of the stuff that's been put out there. But Rex Burkhead can fill kind of this role that Gronk had, where they can get him matched up on a linebacker or safety and kind of get a little bit of a mismatch. Now, it's tough to trust what New England does with their running backs every week and what they do with their game plan every week, and I do think Sony Michel is going to have a big role there. But in a PPR league that is deep, maybe a 16-teamer, you can make a strong case that Rex Burkhead should be a priority pickup. And again, like I said, New England, you just never know what they're going to do. But I know that Belichick and Brady tend to trust certain guys, and I think Burkhead is in that circle of trust for them. He's dependable, and he's just got so much flexibility. They can line him up at running back, they can split him out wide. They can just do so many things to create mismatches for Rex Burkhead. So he might be another guy I would look at and maybe see if, as a deep league pickup. And then a wide receiver, we've talked about Tyrell Williams, talked about Marquise Brown, Terry McLaurin. A lot of these wide receiver pickups are guys that, depending on what your roster construction look like coming out of the draft, I mean, they could start for you this week. I don't know that I would advocate necessarily for them being like a wide receiver 1 type, but you could definitely look at them as a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, and I would trust them. And I think John Ross has a legitimate chance to come out and ball. Same thing with Terry McLaurin. And DJ Shark, didn't miss a beat whenever they brought in Gardner Minshew. So, a lot of these receivers that had these big games, last Sunday and even Tyrell Williams on Monday night, I think they can be trusted more than maybe we thought coming in. And 1 week in the NFL is hard to say for sure. But, when you're talking about the target volume being there, that means they were heavily involved in the game plan. And if the target volume is there, that's kind of how you see moving forward, is this a guy that I can pick up and use, or is this just a one-off where, he just had a really good game? That's why I'm encouraged by, like, John Ross getting the 12 targets, because there's just nobody else. And you got Mixon, you got John Ross, you got Tyler Boyd. There's nobody else in that offense. If Mixon goes down, you get Gio Bernard, you get John Ross, you get Tyler Boyd. I mean, if Mixon doesn't play, Andy Dalton might have to throw the ball 50 times again. I mean, John Ross is going to get volume if Andy Dalton's throwing the ball in upwards of 40 or 50 times. So don't be afraid of that. Embrace it. Then, again, a tight end, Hawkinson, Waller. If you want a deep league flyer, I guess, at the tight end position, and a lot of this might depend on the health of Jordan Reed, but you can do worse than Vernon Davis. He scored a touchdown on Sunday. Looks like, it just seems like whenever he plays, when he gets his chance, he tends to do well. And it looks like he's still got something left in the tank. He hurdled a couple guys last weekend. So, I think you could do worse as someone who maybe, and again, it looks like Jordan Reed's going to play. Obviously, he's out, but Jordan Reed is like the tin man. So he's always hurt. So you could do worse there, and maybe even take a look at a guy like Tyler Higbee for the Rams. He did get 5 targets on Sunday, had 4 catches, 20 yards, and a touchdown. Of course, the touchdown kind of saved his day, but the 5 targets is pretty healthy. So those are my waiver wire pickups this week. As far as matchups to exploit, like I said, Baltimore, the passing game, they get a bad Arizona defense. I think you're safe to go with Lamar. I think you're safe to go with Mark Ingram. I think you're safe to go with Hollywood Brown. I don't think any of these guys are off limits against Arizona. And the question is, do you run it back? With a guy like Kyler Murray, Larry Fitzgerald had a great game. David Johnson. I mean, this is going to be a much stiffer test for them. But the thing is, with Arizona, Detroit's front is no joke. but Arizona coming up to Baltimore is way different than Detroit going down there. So Dak Prescott it looks like he could have another big game this week. Tom Brady gets Miami, assuming Antonio Brown plays. Tom Brady might throw for 500 yards and 8 touchdowns. And I don't think they're going to pull their foot off the gas pedal there. So if I was looking to start people just based on matchup, it would definitely be Lamar, Dak, and Tom Brady. And of course, some of these guys, you're not going to bench them. You're not going to bench Drew Brees. You're not going to bench Patrick Mahomes is going up against Oakland, and Oakland's defense looked incredible on Monday night, but you're not going to bench Patrick Mahomes. You're not going to bench Deshaun Watson against Jacksonville. But I don't know that those are matchups necessarily that I would feel like super comfortable with. If you're looking straight matchup plays, Jackson, Prescott, and Brady are your guys. Moving to the running back position, again, some of these guys are matchup proof. McCaffrey, I think, is matchup proof against Tampa Bay. I think McCaffrey could go off against Tampa Bay. Marlon Mack is Tennessee. Again, that could be a game flow game for him, but Tennessee is not a defensive front that I'm afraid of. Dalvin Cook gets Green Bay. The game this week, though, is going to be New Orleans and the Rams. There's going to be a lot of points scored there. It's out in L.A., but I think New Orleans is probably still a little bit upset about what happened last year in the NFC Championship game. So that Rams and New Orleans game, start your studs, get them in the game. Obviously Kamara, wouldn't be afraid to play Malcolm Brown. Wouldn't be afraid to play Latavius Murray a little bit. Latavius Murray had a decent game the other night. If you need a cheap flex option or something like that. Ezekiel Elliott against Washington, you can't bench him, but again, proceed with caution there. I think some of the stuff you got to be a little bit careful. If Mixon does play against San Francisco, I think he could have a big game, but I think a lot of it's going to depend on health. Not afraid to play Saquon against Buffalo, of course. Definitely going to play him. Aaron Jones against Minnesota, that one I would probably be a little bit more leery with. Aaron Jones did not look great the other night against a tough Bears team. But again, you probably invested in Aaron Jones, so if you invest in Aaron Jones, you're going to have to play him. The guy who I think will have a big week this week is Leonard Fournette going up against Houston. I think they're going to try to get him involved early and often. He did have 4 catches for 28 yards last week in the passing game. But Leonard Fournette's the guy who I think is going to have a big week at the running back position. Moving on to wide receiver, again, Green Bay, they get Minnesota. Not an easy matchup for Devontae Adams. Amari Cooper, looking at Washington, again, definitely starting Amari Cooper. Starting your main guys, your studs and things like that. I'm not going to shy away from any of those guys. Definitely going back to the Chris Godwin well this week. Sammy Watkins, love Calvin Ridley this week at home against Philadelphia. Obviously, all of the Miami wide receivers. Love me some Cooper Kupp this week as well. Willing to possibly go back to the well with the Carolina passing offense. This might be a good chance to buy low on some of those guys and get them in your lineup. D.D. Westbrook, another guy, kind of disappointed a little bit. Only 5 catches, 30 yards and touchdown, but I'm going right back to the D.D. Westbrook well. Probably not going to play like Jamison Crowder. Probably would not start him against Cleveland unless I absolutely had to. I'd move him down my rankings. Would not start Cortland Sutton against Chicago. I think they're going to destroy Denver. Interesting thing about Pittsburgh and Seattle. I think Seattle is going to be able to throw the ball in Pittsburgh if they want to. It's just a matter of how they want to approach the game. And I think Pittsburgh will be able to move the ball in the air against Seattle's defense. That could actually be a higher scoring game, I think, than people want it to be. There's a lot of scenarios that could play out there. But DK Metcalf is one guy we haven't talked about. 4 catches, 89 yards in week 1. I think DK Metcalf could be a guy that's kind of a sneaky start by the end of the year because got 6 targets and kind of sneaking around, underrated, sneaking around out there. So DK Metcalf's a guy that I like moving forward, and then obviously the tight end position, which is just sometimes just a complete and utter wasteland. The guys I really like this week are Mark Andrews, Austin Hooper, going right back to the Darren Waller well against Kansas City. not a huge fan this week of Delaney Walker against Indianapolis. Also not a huge fan of David Njoku against the Jets. Obviously Hunter Henry getting hurt. Looks like he's going to be out 4 to 6 weeks minimum. That's probably on the optimistic side. That's going to hurt the LA offense overall. But again, it'll become more of a funnel situation with Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Austin Eckler getting more of the work. So this segment has taken entirely longer than I thought it was going to. I'm sure this will get cut down. So if you do have questions for me, you can find me on Twitter at Jason Kimlowski. Again, Dynasty Football Digest is the page I'm on. You can check out some of my articles on there weekly. We've got start sits, we've got rankings, we've got waiver wire pickups, and then we also have just articles on individual players from both redraft and the dynasty perspective. So again, Josh, just want to thank him for letting me come on. Hit me up on Twitter with your start sit questions or any other fantasy football related information. Other than that, good luck this week, and we will see you next time.
Back with you on the Josh Kirby on Sports podcast. Dan Dembski alongside Josh Kirby. Thanks once again to Jason Kamlowski for that wonderful fantasy football segment for us. So diving right back into week 1 action, wrapping things up, we have the Rams and Panthers. The Rams, I'm surprised they kept it close with Cam Newton, the Panthers, but they got the job done there, 30-27 in Carolina. Yeah,
good game. Both pretty solid teams. I was surprised the Panthers were, had a shot to win it, but they're both going to have very solid seasons, I think, especially the Rams with last season. So, and I think the Panthers have a shot at challenging for the top of the division. We'll see what that brings.
Yeah. So, you got to look out for Todd Gurley. When he gets healthy, how will he perform? I don't think he was 100% in this game. They weren't going to run any kind of pitch count or anything, but you just have to see how he does when he's 100% healthy.
Yeah, it's almost like they were treading water per se. They weren't giving it their all. But he had 97 yards. But yeah, he's going to be scary good once he gets 100% healthy or when he gets near 100%.
All right, the next game, one I really want to talk about some stuff in this game. The Chiefs 40, the Jags 26. Myles Jack gets a ejected for fighting. The Jags lost Nick Foles, a broken clavicle, and Tyreek Hill gets injured as well. So a big blow for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Not a good way to start off their season.
No, but I think the expectations were not very high for them coming into this year. I think people thought they would be better with Nick Foles, but now they're going with Gardner Minshew, who's a lot of people have never heard of him. He was pretty solid in college. He didn't play that. He played pretty well in the grand scheme of things. You're asking a lot for a young quarterback to come in against, a team like the Chiefs. It's just so dominant. And the Jags don't have a defense, let's face it. And the Chiefs kind of were able to do whatever they wanted to do. Patrick Mahomes was able to fire all over the field. So that's a sure win for the Chiefs. And they proved it, I thought.
Yeah, so Chiefs still looking like the same Chiefs. Let's see how far they can go this year. Pat Mahomes looks like the same old Pat Mahomes. So
yeah.
Another key addition, LaShawn McCoy. I really like the Kansas City Chiefs picking him up. Will be great for the
it's amazing that he's still being bounced around the league. But yeah, he had a really good game, Josh. Obviously averaged 8.1 yards per carry. So that's going to be a nice addition for them. Not like they need any more additions to their offense, but it certainly helps.
Yeah. Moving right along, the Chargers over the Colts in overtime. This game started out looking like the Chargers were going to take it, but Jacoby Brissett and the Colts rallied, and I think they were just playing for each other. After Andrew Luck retired, it's the Jacoby Brissett show now. So I think the Colts have heart to try to have a good season for Andrew Luck, who is no longer with the team. They miss him, but I think the Colts are overcoming adversity, and they fought their hearts out to try to win this game, but the Chargers took it by a walk-off touchdown, 30-24.
Yeah, and the Chargers used their weapons. Of course, Eckler, who a lot of people didn't pick him up in fantasy. 12 rushes, 58 yards, and a touchdown. Played extremely well. Also played well in the receiving game. But I want to talk about the Colts shortly here for a second. And Jacoby Brissett played extremely well, Josh. 190 yards, 2 touchdowns, no turnovers. And the Colts were able to run the ball very effectively too. They have some real talent on that offense. And I think Jacoby Brissett is a solid quarterback. It could be a solid quarterback. I don't know if he's there yet. But he certainly, if something was to happen to Andrew Luck before, I would have said he's a solid backup quarterback. And I think he can bloom into a pretty good NFL quarterback.
You look at his numbers, he had 190 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So he's doing some good. He's been in a starting role before, used to play for the Patriots. So I think he'll be a solid quarterback going in the near future.
Yeah, and he learned behind Brady, so I think that's a good starting place for any young quarterback, is to learn behind the best in the game.
Yeah, unfortunately, I benched Austin Eckler in my fantasy league. I was very upset about that.
Yeah. I think I benched him in one of my leagues too, so don't feel bad.
Next game, this one I was biting my nails over. The Seahawks beat the Bengals 21-20. I had a league pick 'em, and I picked the Seahawks, and they also almost lost. Zach Taylor's debut coaching the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals looked pretty good. I thought they were still going to struggle, but Andy Dalton, 35
Andy Dalton was unreal.
418 yards. That's ridiculous for Andy Dalton. I did not expect that. And they were playing on the road too in Seattle, and they give the Seahawks that close of a fight.
Yeah, that was a surprising game, Josh. I thought the Bengals would get destroyed. Now I'm worried about playing the Bengals in our division, but Andy Dalton, 400 yards, no turnovers. That's the key, because so many times throughout the past, 5-6 years, he's had problems with that. So, they could be a team that is a little bit of a sleeper team, possibly. Maybe in that division, and maybe in the NFL in general. But the Seahawks they still played well. I mean, Russell Wilson, 14 of 20, almost 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. Played pretty darn well, and a nice start for Metcalf, the rookie wideout for Seattle. DK Metcalf
had the chance to catch up.
Played extremely well. So he had 89 yards. 89 yards in that game. And really, that game could have gone either way. So the Seahawks, I think, are lucky to escape with the win. They'll take it and move on, but they got to be sweating that one out.
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. It was a nail biter for me because I didn't want to lose. So moving on, another NFC East battle. The Dallas Cowboys. Zeke just got signed. He played great. Dak Prescott, almost perfect, 405 yards and 4 TDs. Even though it was against the Giants, but he goes unsigned going into this game. So does this give Jerry a reason to give him a new contract after this game?
It's tough to say, Josh, because you're playing a Giants defense that is one of the weakest in the NFC. So it's hard to see that one game gets you a contract in week 1 of the regular season. I think he's got to prove himself somewhere down the line. Now, if the Cowboys go to the postseason, which they should, it's either going to be the Eagles or the Cowboys from your all's division, which...
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, sadly enough. I think the Cowboys are have a slight edge just because I think they have more talent on the offensive side of the ball. But I think Dak will. I mean, he's going to get paid eventually. I think you would agree. Just the timing of it is what we're all waiting to hear. So, yeah, he had an unbelievable game, and the Giants just looked lost. Eli Manning, they showed his sad puppy dog face on the sideline several times throughout the game, and it kind of makes you feel bad for him in some way. The Giants just didn't have it. I mean, they started the game off pretty well, scored early, but just couldn't keep up, and the Cowboys just dismantled that Giants defense. That's a concern going forward for the Giants.
Yeah. Yeah, so the NFC East, like you said, it's going to be a race between the Cowboys and the Eagles. So we'll see who comes out on top in that division. The Cowboys should have another easy one against the Redskins Sunday at 1:00. So I will be sure to tune into that one. So some other scores: the Lions and the Cardinals, as you know, tied. You got the 49ers doing exceptionally well, beating Bruce Arians and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Sunday night game, you had the defending Super Bowl champion New England Patriots do what they do best and win football games against the Pittsburgh Steelers, only putting up 3 points in the third quarter.
Yeah, that was weak.
Yeah, and the Monday night games, you have the Oakland Raiders. They came out. You look at Josh Jacobs. He looks like he could have potential in this league. 24-16 over the Broncos. But the last game I want to talk about is the Monday night thriller, the Saints and the Texans. That last minute, they went back and forth until Will Lutz kicked a game-winning field goal for the Saints to win it. And Deshaun Watson looked amazing.
Yeah, he played extremely well. 268 yards, three scores, and he had a pick. But this Texans team is dangerous. There's no reason why they should have blown this game. But I guess you could have said the other thing if the Texans come out on top. But that was a fun game to watch, Josh. I don't know if you caught any of it, but man, that last minute was thrilling. Two lead changes to end the game. So, you like you said, the Saints doing what they do. Drew Brees, he's done this so many times. 370 yards, he makes it look easy, and the Saints do it again. So, that was an exciting game, and those are two exciting, explosive offenses, and that's what I think people want to see. And I hope they have more Monday night games that follow suit, because the game that followed it was kind of a dud in the Raiders and Broncos.
Yeah, but let's not forget about the NFL turned WWE with the DeAndre Hopkins Sumo Slam. A lot of people were talking about that on local sports radio on my way into work this morning. Did you happen to see that? Because I just saw a replay.
Yeah, I saw it live, and I've seen it before. I've seen it several times before. It just happens a lot of times when players pick up players from the behind. They just sort of slam them down. But yeah, that was pretty malicious, and I don't know if he meant to do it, but yeah, certainly a crazy hit. It looked like a throwback hit, kind of.
Yeah. So it was a crazy game. I mean, I saw the highlights,
unreal.
But wow, that's one game to cap off week one. That was like the capper for week one.
It was the perfect ending. You had
a Cinderella ending to week one.
Cinderella, I like that. It's pretty good.
Yep, a Cinderella ending to week one, and that wraps up our week one NFL football talk. Looking ahead to week two, I'll run down who's playing who really quick. Thursday night, you have the Buccaneers and the Panthers. And going into Sunday, the 49ers facing the Bengals, the Chargers facing the Lions, the Vikings and the Packers, the Colts and the Titans, the Patriots and the Dolphins. Oh, goody. How are the Patriots going to do this game? The Bills
They're
and
going
the
to win
Giants.
100-0.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. The Bills and the Giants, the Seahawks and the Steelers, the Cowboys and the Redskins, the Cardinals and the Ravens, the Jags and the Texans, the Chiefs and the Raiders, the Bears and the Broncos, the Saints and the Rams in a rematch of the NFC championship game, where they had that no call on pass interference. Sunday night game, you have the Eagles and the Falcons, and Monday night, the Browns and the Jets. Dan, last thoughts about week 1 before we end things here.
Well, all I have to say is thank God football's back. That deserves a round of applause. You should add that in there. I mean, it wasn't all pretty. It wasn't all perfect, but football's back and all is right again. I think that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I'm so glad football is back. Football is back for the next 5 months. The long road to the Super Bowl starts right now. It's going to be interesting to see week after week who takes the front runner, who gets a step closer to winning that Lombardi trophy. Week 1 is the first step in winning a Lombardi trophy. And some teams will make it to the playoffs, some teams won't. And that's what's so great about NFL football. And I'm glad you all stuck around with us listening to the last 2 weeks of college football and Dan's opinion and a full week 1 breakdown along with fantasy football talk. This was such a great podcast, and I am glad you were able to join us for this one, Dan.
Thanks for having me, Josh. I really had a lot of fun. I look forward to being on next week.
Yes, sir. As always, the Josh Kirby on Sports podcast, part of the Mayo Please Podcast Network, is brought to you by Route 11 Chips. Make sure you find a bag today inside your local Martin's, Food Line, and Giant stores. You can catch us on www.mayoplease.com, Twitter at the Mayo Please, and the Mayo Please on all streaming platforms, along with the Josh Kirby on Sports podcast on all streaming platforms, along with Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And you can email us if you have any questions about the NFL season week 1 or any questions in general, kirbyonsports@gmail.com. Dan, once again, thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, we say so long and peace out.